outset that the nature of this conversation is more analytical than a conversation that goes into the details of what is happening in each of our friends' countries. But I know I speak for everyone here, including our president, Randy Weingarten, when I say that we are in awe of the courage that you show in your nations, and that we know we owe the obligation of solidarity to you, and we will be good on that obligation. So today we have 4 individuals, and I will do my best to not destroy their names in introducing them. Sitting immediately to my left is Raymond Basilio, who's the General Secretary of the Alliance of Concerned Teachers in the Philippines, and has been Education International board member in the Asia Pacific region, and unfortunately is now forced to go from safe house to safe house to maintain the safety and security under the current Philippines regime. Immediately to his right is Fatima da Silva, who's the General Secretary of the Brazilian Confederation of Workers in Education, which is one of the largest teacher unions in the world. And as you know, in Brazil, there is now a very repressive situation that has developed with the election of a man who can only be described as a fascist, Bolsonaro. To her right is Özgür Özdoğan, who is the General Secretary of the Teachers Union in Turkey, and has been a leader in denouncing the widespread attacks and repressions on teachers, university academics, and academic freedom, which has occurred in the wake of the attempted coup in Turkey. And at the very end of the table is Ordile Kadolier, who's the International Secretary of the SNES-FSU in France. So these conversations today are premised on the idea that we're experiencing a global wave of authoritarian populisms of the far right, which is seen in these countries that are all represented here. And that many of those movements have unfortunately gained state power. It is something that for us in the United States, we have experienced our own form in the development of Trumpism. So our goal today is to learn from each other's experiences. The title I gave to the conversation was The New Faces of Fascism, but posed as a question, not a declaration, in order to open an inquiry into whether the movements we are experiencing share certain essential features not only with each other, but also with the classical fascist movements of the 1930s. Given the rhetorical power that fascism derives from its history, this is a deliberately provocative formulation, with the goal of engendering serious discussion on the nature of these movements we are facing and how that affects our responses as education unions. To be clear, the suggestion of the title is not that this is a simple reenactment of classical fascism, but that today's wave of right-wing authoritarian populism is in the same family of political movements as the classical fascists of the 1930s and shares far too much common ground with it. So let me start with this question, which I will pose to all of our members on the panel. One of the primary features of classical fascism is the way in which it took undeniable economic hardship and exploitation.
Sorry. Can you a little bit
Slower? Okay.
Translator, sorry.
No, I will slow down.
Can you start again with the question? Sorry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Let me start with this question. One of the
Yeah, I think
If you
so.
don't mind.
Thank you.
yeah,
Standing up is not convenient for you.
one of the primary features of classical fascism is the way in which it took undeniable economic hardship and exploitation, largely the result of the Great Depression, and deployed it in a political discourse that scapegoats the other and the outsider as the source of these economic woes. The German socialist August Bebel captured this relationship between economics and politics when he famously described anti-Semitism as a socialism of fools. To what extent do the authoritarian populisms of the far right that you are experiencing today in your countries use reaction to economic conditions caused by the Great Recession and years of neoliberal economic policies of austerity, privatization, deregulation to target immigrants, refugees, minority religions such as Islam and Judaism, LGBTQ people, and minority ethnic or national groups? And anyone who would like to jump in the pool first can start.
We're gonna jump first.
Go.
Okay, so let me start first. First of all, I want to greet all of you on behalf of our trade union of teachers and science employers from Turkey, Eğitimsen. Leo sent us the questions actually before 2 or 3 days, and we had the time to get prepared to the questions. But let me start from another point of view by giving an idea, for setting the scene to understand it better what is going on in our country. So I think that you all know or have heard about it. Turkey is a European country in some sense, but in the other it's a Middle East country. And so there are very strong calls traditionally and historically against the Western world and the symbols which have been representing the Western world, Western culture. So most of the governments ruling Turkey have used these calls against Western culture very efficiently, and now the current government in Turkey, the ruling party, has been using it for the last 17 years. And the dominating factor, the political references of the current political party, the ruling party, is fundamentalist or political Islam on one part, and on the economic part, the neoliberal policies. But as a matter of fact, for the nature of the governments, it's not preferable for them to discuss the economic policies openly with the public and to use them. Instead of using or discussing economic policies, they prefer to discuss which is easier and which is simple. So these are sometimes political, these are sometimes cultural, these are sometimes religious, and sometimes historical. And I think that the new far-right populism is gaining power just from these sources. And I can easily say you that we experience this every day. So the policies of the far right is getting power from these sources, and they are using this efficiently. For example, against the LGBT people, or against the minorities, against the political groups who are opposing the ruling party's policies. They do not discuss this on the level of economy, on the level of recession, but they discuss it with the words, with the symbols of culture, religion, history, something like that. So I think that it will be a starting point for the discussion.
Good. Sure.
Vai ser por traducción. Bien. Bien. Es, en primer momento, dar gracias a la invitación de la AFT. Es un honor poder estar acá con ustedes.
First, to thank the invitation of AFT. It's an honor to be here with you all.
Y gracias por la solidaridad en todos los momentos que estamos pasando en Brasil. Desde el golpe, a AFT está estado muy cerca de nosotros.
And thank you for the solidarity since the coup. AFT has been really near to us, helping us.
Eternamente grata.
So we are eternally grateful.
Me acompañam acá também Heleno Araújo, que es nuestro presidente de la CNTE, de nuestra organización.
So I'm joined here by Heleno Araújo, who is the president of our organization, CNT.
Nuestro coordinador, Humberto García, que es de Rodríguez, que es nuestro coordinador de la Internacional de Educación. Y también acá Gabriel, que es también de la Oficina de la Internacional de Educación y que gentilmente va a me permitir comunicar con ustedes, con mi portuñol.
Humberto, he is the chief coordinator of the regional office in Latin America, and I am also coordinator of the office, and I will be helping Fátima to communicate with you all.
Bien, creo que en este contexto lo que tenemos que analizar un poco, cómo logramos llegar a esta tragedia nestes países que estamos compostos acá nesta mesa.
So in this context, I think we have to analyze in this tragedy how did we get here, all these countries that are sitting here in this table?
Porque foram governos que estão nesses postos de poder através do voto popular.
How these governments are now in these powerful spaces through the popular vote.
Dentro de que é dos princípios da democracia, eleger nossos representantes.
And this is one of the principles of democracy, to elect our leaders.
E em caso nuestro de Brasil, o processo eleitoral que levou Bolsonaro à presidência da República.
In our case in Brazil, the electoral process that led Bolsonaro or allowed Bolsonaro to be president of the country.
É uma trajetória que começou desde 2013, não foi del dia para a noite.
This started since 2013. This didn't happen from one day to the other.
Que passou por 2016 com golpe de Estado.
This go through 2016 coup d'etat.
Porque que passou com Dilma é golpe.
Because what happened to Dilma was a coup.
Que tem vários fatores envolvidos, involucrados.
Different factors that were involved in the situation.
Bolsonaro é fruto disto também, e porque as eleições passou também por a principal causa.
Bolsonaro is also a product of this, because this is the main cause that allowed him to be there.
E ele só é presidente hoje porque encarcelaram a Lula para poder ganhar as eleições, porque senão não chegaria ao poder. E como chegou? Com 3 discursos.
He is only president now because they put Lula in jail. And how did he get there? Well, mainly with 3 speeches or 3 subjects.
Porque mesmo com Lula encarcelado, logramos com nosso candidato levar a segunda.
Because equally with Lula in jail, we managed with our candidate to reach second in the elections.
Contra tudo e contra todos. E sem nenhum debate. E com os fake news.
Against all odds, without any debate, and against also the fake news.
E eles ganham com discurso com a questão da seguridade.
They won with a speech about security.
Religiosidade, esta coisa das igrejas pentecostales, com a teologia da prosperidade.
And they won through religion with the Pentecostal religion and the prosperity Christianism.
E com a falsa moral da família ideal.
And with the fake morals of the ideal family.
E daí todo a coisa de perseguição.
And from there, all the persecution that we are facing.
Com o judiciário, com os meios de comunicação, y con el mercado y con el capital mundial todo.
With the judicial system, the media, and the worldwide economics inside.
Bien, y después todo el gobierno, creo que hay más cuestiones que vamos, creo que hay más cuestiones, ¿no? Que vamos a desarrollar, entonces podemos decir. Entonces, este es el escenario de cómo llegan y por qué llegamos, y después podemos dividir en 3 puntos.
So there are more things that we can talk about. This is how he get in power, but there are other 3 things that we can talk about later. Okay. Ardea?
Yeah, okay. First of all, thanks for the invitation. It's nice to visit you. Very happy to be with you, dear AFT delegates. And I would like to start my preliminary speech by telling you that since 2015, I think that my country, France, has lost confidence. Why am I saying that? I am saying that because of the terrorist attacks we had in Paris in November 2015, and I'm taking the opportunity of being with you all of you, to tell you that the letters of support and solidarity that we received from all over the world, and especially the letter from Randy, help us a lot to keep the confidence that we need to fight all together against any form of terrorism, against any form of far-right policies. This is an important message, and this will help you to understand what we are experiencing in France now. You must be aware of the fact that the far right and the main political party is what you call now the National Rally is gaining more and more power ground. I don't know how you can say that in English. Because the two political parties in France were absolutely incapable of providing some hope for the population, whether they are on the right side or let's say on the left side. So the far right in France, especially with Mrs. Le Pen, who is, let's say, the promoter of nationalism, nationalistic policies, is gaining more power, not at, let's say, national level, since, as you know, 2 years ago, Marine Le Pen failed. She was not elected as president, but she was a contender of Emmanuel Macron. But now, what you should be understanding is that their policy is to get more and more seats at regional, municipal, local levels. They are fighting everywhere, and they are promoting their policies against immigrants, against what they call foreigners. But I don't know what a foreigner is, especially in France. Against, LGBT, I wouldn't say so, because they're trying to keep away from this aspect. And this is quite interesting, because it seems that in some countries, LGBT persons are being, threatened, but this is not the case in France, coming from the National Rally. What are they doing? What is the National Rally doing? And just to try and answer Leo's question, they are using the weakness of social welfare policies in my country, the weakness of economic policies, the weakness in terms of fighting inequalities in my country, to put on the table their agenda. And their answer is France for French people only. France for French people only. Okay? And this message, and I think this is a relationship between, of course, what you call populism, we call it more nationalistic policies, and the impact on education. This message is the message that we have to fight as trade union leaders and educators in general. So, but I will come back to that later on. Maybe, and they are also using all the things that are related to immigration policies to convey the message of, okay, France for French people first. We should not open our doors. We should stay, within our country. And okay, that's absolutely awful. Now, because I know some of you, especially Pat, this morning mentioned to me the yellow jacket movement. I don't have the time to explain, but I will be very short. This movement started last autumn, and I believe it started on real, and let's say very, credible grounds in terms of fighting inequalities, whether they are economical, social, or even cultural. But unfortunately, and this is our view within SFSU, this movement has been, influenced, not to say manipulated, by the far right. Okay? It's not a neutral movement. All the yellow jacket movement is saying aloud that they are not political, that they are, they hate, believe me, they hate trade unions. They do. They are not. They state that they are not political, but they are. They are very politically oriented. And unfortunately, the far right is within this yellow jacket movement in different places all over the country. It may be different from one city to the other, because and I will just stop here for the moment. I know that some of you saw, of course, the reports about Paris, what happened in Paris, in terms of, fights with the police, but it also happened not only in the big cities in France, but even in small cities. I live in Dijon, which is a 250,000 people city. It's an average city, and even in my city, during the first weeks, where we had very bad problems in terms of some sort of riots, and people were very aggressive towards people walking down the streets and all this kind of stuff. So it's a very difficult movement to handle with. And for the moment, it's been silent, but unfortunately, it will probably start again in September. And I don't know, and I'm not President Macron's advisor, but I really don't know how things will go on or about this issue. So,
Good afternoon, and would like to say thank you for having me here. And of course, we all know Duterte, and perhaps you heard him in the news yesterday saying that, "Oh, boys, come to Boracay and see the beautiful girls of Boracay." That's him. During his State of the Nation address, that's his words. A lot of, unbecoming of a president were seen yesterday. Now, he rose into power by presenting himself as an alternative. Because for decades, you used to have a president representing the elites. So he presented himself to be from the masses. A common person that adheres to the calls for salary increase, for the banning of contractualization, for independent foreign policy, so on and so forth. However, after elections, things turned out to be different. His appointed cabinet members that came from the ranks of academics and from the ranks of social activists were removed on unknown grounds, and later on, contractualization was legalized instead of having it banned. He said that he wants OFWs to go home to the Philippines and work in the Philippines, but no, he's now creating the Department of OFW so that all OFWs will be catered by the government, and the government will be the ones sending abroad. He said he will work for salary increase of workers, but instead he gave only centavos. And he's the only president in our history who managed to implement a regressive taxation system, wherein the poor were being taxed and less taxes were implemented for the rich. That widens the gap. Now, since this is the situation, labor movements, including the teachers, reacted. We want to correct the narratives. So what Duterte did? All those who are criticizing his policies are marked as yellow, and therefore you are a supporter of the elite. In order to cover up, they created the company of trolls, or these operators of fake news, operators of Facebook accounts, and these are in thousands. Even Oxford made a study on this. And what are they doing with these Facebook accounts? They instill hatred among people. For instance, if I posted something in Facebook criticizing his policy on drug war, somebody will say, do you want your child, your daughter to be raped by an addict? And that will cater more and more many negative comments, and that will at the end of the day, the one who posted will be attacked. For instance, I received several messages that maybe you're a drug addict, maybe you want your sister, your daughter to be killed, to be raped, and that's the scenario. Therefore, in the Philippines, saying something against Duterte or criticizing him means you are a legitimate target. Now, to make things better, he issued several executive orders. What are these executive orders? The most alarming executive order is Executive Order number 32, which placed the entire Metro Manila, the capital region of the Philippines, under the supervision of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. It's no longer the Philippine National Police. So all security matters of the National Capital Region will be handled by the Armed Forces. So, why are you putting the military in the city? What's wrong? So they're looking at us as their enemies. Now, what did he do to the urban poor and to the indigenous people? During his second State of the Nation address, he openly said, "Let the indigenous people communities be bombed." When the Marawi siege happened, the terrorist attack in Marawi City, he ordered this military. If you go to the war area and you found a girl and you rape that, don't worry, I'll take care of that. No, that's very simple for him to say. And when you say, what about human rights? He will just say, I don't care about human rights, I only care about your right to life. For him, right to life is different to human rights. It's very problematic, President. Now, right now, our indigenous communities were bombed, literally bombed, because projects for minings are coming in, especially in Mindanao, in the southern part of the Philippines. Railways are coming as financed by China. Those are the power relations right now in the Philippines. And for the teachers, since we keep on demanding better salaries because we don't want our teachers resigning from work and going abroad working as domestic helpers. We want our teachers to stay at home. So what happened to us? During the election, he promised to double our pay. That didn't happen. Several times he promised again, no, just wait, I will double your pay. But we didn't stop. We continue campaigning. Here comes December 2018. He was caught off guard. We don't have any proposal for the next year to increase our salary. And there was a big rally of Filipino teachers. There was a strike coming in. There comes the repression against us. My organization, there was a confidential document issued by the Office of the President that all members of the Alliance of Concerned Teachers and supporters must be profiled. Must be profiled. When we were able to get the document, we broadcasted the document. We announced it to the media, and there were a lot of articles and news about it. What comes next was the harassment to me. Several phone calls telling me that we know your mother is sick, your father is there, you live there, and we can always kill you. That there are 4 of us ordered to kill you. But you have the option. You have the option. You can leave. You just cooperate to us. And that happened not only once, several times. But the most horrible one was when I was tailed. As I get off the taxi, from the office, going home, somebody at my back just whispered, "You're next." That changed my life. I decided we must do something. Now, I've been a human rights defender since my college days. I am 32 years old and I've been activist since the age of 15. So more than half of my life I'm an activist, but this is my first time. This is my first time to have this kind of harassment, violations of my rights. But I am very thankful because I have you, I have Randy. The message of Randy was very powerful. I have the Education International who wrote appeals to the Office of the President. By the way, there are 3,500 protest letters that arrived in the Office of the President. And because of that, the profiling stopped. And just an update, yesterday, a court hearing happened in the Philippines, and the Ombudsman said that there's a probable cause against the government officials involved in the conduct of profiling, and hopefully the temporary court protection will be given to me. But that is just one phase of the case in the Philippines. We have almost 30,000 people killed already. That's why I'm very afraid. Why? Because priests, local government officials were killed. Leaders of unions were killed in the Visayan region, in the Mindanao region. He keeps on attacking the Roman Catholic Church. Why? Because the Roman Catholic Church is very vocal against his mouth. He's being misogynist. He keeps on attacking the women leaders. There's a strong women movement in the Philippines called Babae Ako. He keeps on attacking the leaders of this women movement. And, he has his game. He signed the anti-Bastos bill, or this anti-catcalling bill. He signed this into law. And said, you're the number one respondent to that law. Because you're doing that. So, that he's a good player. He will do this, and he will do this. And the sad thing is, they were very successful in spreading fake news. In the Philippines, no one uses Twitter is not popular. Facebook is much popular. And what they're just doing is to have the headline of the news article, and without any content, they will just share that. Because in the Philippines, you can only read the content if you have mobile phones, you have the data. If you don't have data, you can only see the headlines. And most of the headlines are misleading. And that's what they're doing. That's why we have a very important role right now to inform our public what is the truth. That's our problem right now. And we are very problematic in terms of that. Because even us, some of our teachers will say, Duterte is very good. I feel safe now walking the street. No one will rape me. But 3 years after he launched his drug war, no drug lord has been in jail. No drug lord were persecuted. Who were persecuted? The poor. Those who are under the guise of, you're a user. You're not even brought to court. Suspicion is now the gateway for you to be killed. We have students caught in a CCTV camera buying only some food items, preparing for an examination tomorrow. He was killed. Why? Because there was an order to the police that you must kill this number of people per day. When investigated, this student was innocent. The youngest casualty, a 2-year-old girl killed a week ago. Why? What's the reason of the police? Casualty because we are just performing our task. Collateral damage, as they say. We cannot accept a single life to be called as a collateral damage. And that's very painful. That's why human rights situation in the Philippines right now is very, very problematic. And we are very thankful for the people of Iceland, for the government of Iceland, for putting forward the resolution for the UN Human Rights Council to conduct the investigation in the Philippines. Although Duterte won't accept that, but this is a political statement. And we are very much happy for the international support that we are getting. And please continue supporting us.
Thank you. So I think we have time for one more quick round. And so what I'm going to ask you to kind of address in some way, in combination if you can, is that one of the features of this authoritarian wave is strong men who make an argument that, in the words of Donald Trump, I alone can solve some danger, some threat, and sometimes it's crime, sometimes it's terrorism. We'd be interested in how that's working in your countries and how you, as teacher unions, are responding, both as organizations that have members in the classroom teachers, and as unions that are organizations of working people.
Okay, shall I start with?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So I will try to answer your question with the relation with the first one. So in Turkey, we think that the trade union life or the problems that we are living or have been living are all related deeply with the politics. And that is the question of creating or constructing an ideological hegemony. So each and every government around the globe is trying to construct an ideological hegemony, and this has two results. The social classes who are obeying their governance, they lead those social classes, but on the other side, they try to liquidate the social classes who are opposing their governance. So in Turkey, what we are living or have been living for a very long time is just this. There are governments who try to construct their hegemony, and there are always working classes, especially, who are opposing or which are opposing these policies. And now, at this time, threat, crime, terrorism, these terms gain their meaning. So, threat is what for which classes? For us, threat is something, but for Erdogan, threat is another thing. So, crime is different for us, and for him, that is very different. So, when we employ the meaning to these terms, the conditions and the political situation in which we have been living is really very important. For example, in Turkey, I want to give you a very specific example and a good news first. There has been a professor, an academic, a peace academic who has been in jail for 75 days, a very famous lady, a professor. She was released yesterday from the prison. That was a good news. But what they have lived for the past 2 years is very dramatic and very historic. There were 1,128 academics who are called peace academics. They signed a petition in 2015 in the year which the clashes were going on in the south and the southeast part of Turkey. and that these clashes were very strong. And these peace academics signed a petition demanding peace to stop the clashes. And after they released the petition, first Erdogan and the other politicians from the ruling party, they targeted all these academics, and most of them were dismissed after the state of emergency was declared because of the failed coup attempt. Most of them were dismissed. Most of them had to leave the cities that they were living because of the threat they got from the Islamic and the fascist groups. And even some of them had to leave Turkey. And now some of them are living in the States, some of them are living in France or in the other Western countries. And this is the result of what Leo asked. The ruling party presented them as a threat to the community. And their act was accepted as a crime by the courts, which are under the control of the government. In another country, this kind of an act, it's not possible in a normal country to be accepted as a crime. But the conditions determine the results. So in Turkey, they have been in front of the courts for nearly 1.5 years, and all of them are getting 15 months imprisonment. And this lady that I was talking about was imprisoned 75 days ago because of signing a petition. Can you imagine a professor, nearly 65, 70 years old, has written a lot of books teaching politics in most of the well-known universities around the globe, and imprisoned because of defining her ideas. And that gained meaning by the far-right populism because presenting these kind of acts as a threat to the community. But in fact, these kind of acts and ideas are a threat to these kind of far-right populist policies. So I think that this is a very important example, and on Thursday a petition will be opened in the plenary session about these anti-democratic acts in Turkey. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ardea?
Yeah. Well, it's a very difficult question. If I remember well, in fact, it's question.
We have to leave in 10 minutes.
Okay, so please go ahead.
Okay,
No
sorry.
problem.
Go ahead.
We have another meeting.
Yeah.
Sí, tenemos.
Yes.
Bien, perdón. Sí, también tenemos. Tenemos en común. Nosotros no vamos a desistir de nuestros países. Allá vamos a seguir haciendo las luchas y las peleas. Estos gobiernos, todos tienen una característica. Perseguir, primero, los maestros, los profesores, los artistas, los negros, los indígenas, que son la grande mayoría y que los incomoda en su proyecto de poder.
So we have a lot of things in common, and we also have in common that we will keep resisting. And also these governments has a lot of things in common. In Brazil, they are hitting the artists, the black, the teachers, all these actually minorities that are not minorities, they are majorities that are being hit because they are not, they do not properly enter their idea of what they want to do.
Nuestra resistencia es articular estes setores e trabalhar enquanto classe trabalhadora e enquanto unidade conjunto desses setores para ser a resistência necessária local, nacionalmente e internacionalmente.
So our role is to articulate all these sectors in a unified resistance to resist at a local level, national level, and also at the international level.
Eu teria várias considerações a hacer, pero el tiempo no es posible. Só voy a hacer sobre la relación con Estados Unidos, que creo que es importante.
So I had a lot of things to say, but you know the time, so I will just speak about the relation with the United States that I think is really important.
Brasil está completamente à venda, todas sus riquezas, sus empresas nacionales, e isto interessa ao mercado americano. y a los grandes empresarios americanos. Evidente que no acá quien está acá.
So Brazil is completely up for sale. All the national industry, every inch of land is up for sale, and this obviously is of interest for the big corporations and the big economic powers of the world, including the ones in the United States.
La elección de Bolsonaro en Brasil significa un grande paso para la vuelta de la influencia de Estados Unidos en Latinoamérica, de lo que era peor que logramos en los años 80 sacar.
So Bolsonaro election means a return of the worst of the United States politics that we managed to get rid of in the 80s. This is the return of that.
De otro modo, pero con la misma injerencia del pasado.
In a new way, but with the same influence of the past.
Y ser más, se el hijo de Bolsonaro vaya a ser allá embajador, más esos lazos, que de ahí no será solamente el económico, será también de todo este retroceso en las cuestiones ideológicas y tal, que se hace un esto completo. Espero tener la oportunidad de podermos dialogar otros momentos y con certeza de contar siempre con la solidaridad de AFT.
So even his own son, Bolsonaro's son, is acting as an embajador. Embajador?
Sí, sí.
Somebody can help me to translate the embajador, like the embassy, ambassador. Ambassador, thank you. The ambassador for that. He is promoting that kind of businesses, shady businesses all around the world, and especially in the United States. His own son is the one that is helping him doing that. Fatima is very thankful. She hoped that she can share a little bit more with you all, but the time now required us to go running to the other meeting.
His son
Thank you.
and Trump's daughter.
Yeah, el hijo de Bolsonaro con la hija de Trump. We have new monarchies, yeah.
Okay, Raymond.
Now, what might happen to the Philippines in the coming days is that we might go into war. The other day, Duterte called on Trump to implement the Mutual Defense Treaty entered between the Philippines and the U.S. government. This is in relation to the problem of the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea matters, and the casualty of the war would be the Filipino people. And that's why we are now forming the anti-war coalition. But Duterte definitely is losing support from major groups right now in the Philippines. That's why all of his officials, supposedly civilian posts, were replaced by retired military generals because he is very afraid right now that the military might do a coup, and that's his way to control the military right now. He's getting all the generals back to the government. Even social welfare, even higher education department, these are now being manned by military officials. And by the way, he doubled the pay of military personnel in the Philippines. That's why it created a gap between government officials. Teachers are paid this much, and the military officials are paid way higher. Even nurses are paid way below the teachers. So there's a looming problem and discontent among government employees in the Philippines right now. And please, when Trump say that he will support the war being called right now by Duterte in the Philippines, please, I appeal to AFP, you call on your government not to engage into war, because the casualty will be us, the common people of the Philippines. And just like our colleague from Brazil, I cannot stay longer also because I still have one forum waiting. And it is very important for us to talk, to share to you, and to give to you our personal narratives. And we hope to see you soon and to share more stories. Randy, thank you very much.
Well, in your question, which is question 3, there is a reference to classroom, and this is what we are interested in SFSU. We are interested in trying to find out some concrete solutions to fight against what we call extremism, far-right views, and also radicalization. Because radicalization is unfortunately gaining ground in my country. So what can we do as an education union? This is an important question, because it is an issue that should be addressed not only by our leadership, our national leadership, but also by our teachers, educators, school leaders almost in every school. And just to give you some idea of what we are trying to do, SNES FSU is involved in a research project which is funded by the European Commission through the European Region of Education International, ETUCE. I will give you just the title of this project. We call it a project in the European Region of Education International. Challenges and good practices related to promoting citizenship and values of freedom, tolerance, and non-discrimination through education. I am representing SNES FSU in the advisory committee of this project. Just to give you some main lines, we are working on what we call citizenship education and democratic school culture. This is item 1. Item 2, we are working on teaching in diverse learning contexts for intercultural dialogue. Item 3, and this is probably one of the most difficult issues we are trying to address, teaching controversial and sensitive issues. And the fourth one is inclusive education as a tool to prevent radicalization and extremism. And this fourth item is in fact very much linked to the topic of our discussion today. Inclusive education is a topic that is very high on the agenda of our government. President Macron wants to have inclusive education in France. He's not the only one among the, let's say, European leaders. Inclusive education is being considered by some European presidents or head of states as the solution to any rise of what you call populism or nationalistic ideas, views. But the real issue is what are the conditions that are necessary to make sure that every child, every young person have access to education, what we call compulsory education, and then have access, of course, to tertiary education. I just wanted to quote this project because I know that you as AFT, you are also very much interested in what some member organizations at the level of EI, at the European level of Education International, try to do to answer in a more concrete way some of the issues we are facing altogether. So, and if you are really interested in this project, I mean, I will send you the final report, because this might give you some ideas. Just like I'm reading your magazine, because I'm very lucky. I receive it and I read it as thoroughly as possible. I will tell you one thing: it helps me quite a lot, because I can find some different approaches to the same problems. Of course, with what I call a more American approach. There is an Atlantic Ocean between us, but our fights are common. We have very strong values, and this is why we are here. This is why we are in Education International, This is because we are strong and we are resisting any kind of threat. Threat is a word that has been used during this chat. And we are also giving confidence to people, especially to children, students, when they lost confidence or when they don't even know what the word confidence means to them. So that will be my conclusion for today. Thanks a lot.
Both yesterday and today, we are incredibly lucky that we are hearing firsthand from people who are heroic beyond words. And so I know our two other colleagues had to go probably to the same forum that I now have to go to. But I just want to say to both of you, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing. And our government is quite separate from us. And we will do whatever we can to be as supportive as we can on the issues and the values of public education, of labor, of truth, of justice, and of democracy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leo.
Thank you.
So, I think some kind of